Dr. Wanek, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to speak with you today.
So, I've been interested in functional medicine for a long, long time. And for those in the audience who are not aware of what it is, what it means, perhaps you could unpack a little bit about you, what you do, and what is functional medicine.
Yes. So I guess I'll start off with my history because it becomes pertinent to my journey into functional medicine. I grew up in a really small town in northwestern Nebraska. My father was a doctor, my mother a nurse, so I had medicine in my veins, as it were. I got an undergraduate degree in chemistry and then finished training in general surgery and had a practice in pediatric surgery for almost 9 years. And during that time, I was quite physically active. It wasn't called CrossFit at the time, but I was training in the gym every day. I was doing weight circuits, cardio. On the weekends, I would do a long bike ride, and I would call myself very fit. I was very strong and had a lot of endurance, but I was also tired. Um, and hungry a lot. And I was introduced to a book called Enter the Zone by a 4 by 100 athlete for the US Olympic team. That's the way she was training. I had no idea about it. I was about 40 years old at the time. And I read the book and I'm kind of confused because this is biochemistry. I thought it was only about me working with patients on ventilators and dealing with them when they couldn't eat, whether it was it's called parenteral nutrition by a feeding tube or IV nutrition by IV. I didn't think biochemistry had anything to do with me. And I started eating biochemically, which is I'll go into more detail, but it's basically a balanced diet of equal calories of protein, carbohydrate, and fat. Immediately I felt better. I was less hungry. I was eating less, but still training at the same capacity. It's like, okay, this is unique. I want to know what's happening. So I went into
Mm.
further study, and that led me into the Institute of Functional Medicine, which at the time in 1998 had a training course called Functional Medicine. And functional medicine essentially gets to the triggers and mediators of disease, the triggers and mediators of disease in inflammation. So I studied that for quite some time, like probably 5 or 6 years, but it always bothered me. There has to be a reason for inflammation. What is the reason for inflammation? And we can call that a trigger of the disease, but what triggers inflammation? And it just occurred to me, well, what does inflammation mean? It means inflames. And that, what causes us to be inflames? That's burning calories. So when I read some things about you and saw the flame method of living, burn a small flame, burn bright, but don't burn out. It's really the same principle from a biochemical physiologic standpoint because burning too many calories, excess, dries the body out. It's a source of dis-ease. And so I kind of moved beyond functional medicine and helping people learn to eat biochemically to more fundamental issues because this really isn't addressed too much in functional medicine. I call it the foundation of life in a physical body itself. And that's water, which serves as a battery. The reason that we as human beings are independent of a light socket at all, we don't have to plug in 4 times a day like the cell phone, is because we have a battery inside of us. And what is a battery? It's a device which turns chemical energy into electrical energy. And that battery inside of us is water. But yet, for electricity to be created, there had to be a power source. And that power source is either the sun or it's the light within us. So that gets into all sorts of even further down into the roots of all this is that we have to maintain power to maintain health. And power is a global force that we all as human beings are connected to It comes from universal energy, which is electricity. Disease, dis-ease, as I say it, is fundamentally caused by a lack of power. And if we lack power, it means we also lack water. Because if you listen to the electrical engineers, I learned from I have a brother-in-law and a brother who are electrical engineers. I also studied with Richard Pollock, who's actually an electrical engineer, but he's written a book called The Fourth Phase of Water and another one called Cells, Gels, and the Engines of Life. And in one of his introductions to one of his chapters, energy equals water. And in my own practice, my own functional medicine practice, which now call foundational medicine, I would say 97% of the people that came into my office were dehydrated. So I had a body composition machine that I would hook people up, and it's called bioresistance testing. And a small electrical current goes from the feet out the hands. It measures impedance to the electrical flow. And that measures then lean body weight, body fat percent, and total body water. And like I said, 97% of the patients that I've seen over the last 25 years have been dehydrated. A
Okay.
dry body doesn't work. And that's, well, what does fire do to the body? It dries it out. And that then connects to the Oriental science, the five elements, earth, air, fire, wood, and metal. So we can even move from a three-dimensional, physical form into the elements that are behind all this, driving all of this stuff to happen. And we need to have a balance of these five elements, which are all integrated together. At the same time, doing as little physical work as possible. That's burning a low flame. By reducing calories, the inflammation is reduced. I'm not talking about fasting. I'm not talking about intermittent fasting or prolonged fasting. I'm talking about calorie reduction at regular meal intervals. Eating food, fueling with food that is based on biochemistry. Because if we don't start with the biochemistry, if we're breaking the simplest rules of biochemistry, then our system just doesn't work optimally. And like I said, when I was 20 and 30 years old doing circuit training and a lot of exercise, I had no clue about all this. I was doing my surgery thing. I had no clue, but I started to study it and it just started to make more sense. And importantly, I was having the experience in my own life of what was happening. So that's always been part of my own functional medicine practice is to teach people how to eat biochemically. And in the modern age, nutrition is seen as a diet plan, whether it's paleo, whether it's carnivore, whether it's high fat, whether it's low fat, whether it's vegan or pescatarian or the maker's diet or whatever it is. Nutrition is seen as a diet. Nutrition is a science. It's a specific science that was elucidated starting in the mid 1800s when the basic scientists discovered oxygen and sulfur and hydrogen and nitrogen. They laid the foundation for biochemistry and then how this all works. Because if we're not eating biochemically, what we're doing is overloading our system chaotically. Our system has a very specific design. That's just not something that I see as being taught or understood by a lot of people. Let's put it that way.
Very interesting. So, what does it mean to eat biochemically? And you mentioned that you changed your diet and created more equilibrium. And as you
Right.
said, I've experimented with ketogenic diet and gone way off, and it seems to have some results. Partly because I think you're just paying attention and
Right.
not
Right.
over consuming. You're just being more deliberate and intentional about what
Right.
you're
Right.
eating. But what
Right.
does it look like to eat biochemically?
So biochemical eating first starts with knowing your body composition and knowing your lean weight. We have to start with some
Mm,
facts. And then that sets up how we determine how many calories a person needs every day. Because the
yes.
calories are determined by our lean weight, which is what I call the machine of our body. Our heart, our
Hmm.
lungs, our brain, our kidneys, our bone, our spleen, our muscles, etc. This is the lean weight. This is the metabolically active part of us. So the number of calories we need every day is determined by our lean weight and our activity level. The more active we are, the more calories that we need to sustain and support that activity. So we know how many calories we need, and now we look at the biochemistry of how those calories are actually processed in our body. Whatever carbohydrate calories are in whatever you put together is going to be digested and processed and put into your bloodstream highway in 2 hours.
Yes.
Whatever protein is in whatever food you put together, whatever protein calories are in the meal you put together are going to be digested and processed and put onto your bloodstream highway 2 to 4 hours after you've eaten. The fat calories in a meal or food take 4 to 6 hours to be fully processed and enter your bloodstream as glucose. Ultimately, either everything you're eating is being turned into glucose or constituent piece parts that are going to restructure the cells of your body, or they're going to be converted into a storage form of food, in the form of fatty acids. And if at any time in this 6 hour window over which carbohydrates and then proteins and then fats are processed, you have exceeded the number of calories that your body can handle, you are in a state of excess. And not only in excess of calories that you've eaten, but because the brain specifically needs continuous supply of glucose, if there's a problem with how calories are being delivered in this, what I call interstate highway traffic, then your body is going to have to give up and go find where the glucose can be produced most quickly. The first place that it's going to go is glycogen stores in the liver. Now, those glycogen stores are being used up as a first energy source all day long in exercise, etc. And they're generally depleted. Glycogen stores that you had to start the day are depleted by the time you wake up the next morning. If you don't have adequate amounts of protein, say you're high fat and low protein, then what is happening in the 2 to 4 hours after you've eaten? Your body needs an ongoing supply of protein and amino acids. Your body is going to your own muscle because that's expendable. Your
Yeah.
liver isn't expendable. Your kidneys aren't expendable. Your spleen and your thymus and your lungs aren't expendable. Your heart isn't expendable, but your skeletal muscle is. So people who are on high fat, low protein, vegan diets don't understand that they're
Yeah.
cannibalizing themselves all day long to maintain glucose to the brain. The same thing happens if a person is eating all their calories in a 6 to 8 minute, 8 hour window, depending,
Yeah.
then the system has been flooded, overloaded with calories in those six to
Yes.
eight hours. And for the next 18 hours, the body is cannibalizing its own protein to serve the needs for amino acids. And
Mm.
that isn't something that I see that people understand about ketogenic diets or, like I said, low protein diets or vegan diets. Most people don't even know how many calories they need every day or how
Oh.
many calories they're eating every day. They wouldn't have a clue. In my own practice, I could of all the people I've seen in the last 25 years, I could count on one hand the number of people who actually knew how many calories they were eating every day. It's, it to me, what I have done, and I guess because it's enhanced my own life, I've taken the positive benefits of what I know and giving it to my patients.
Mm.
And yes, when they finally start to do these things and understand biochemistry, then your life changes because the other thing in all of this, so what the brain and all cells are looking for is a blood sugar that's just right. It's called euglycemia. And if the blood sugar is high or low, the body's energy is going to be expended to bring the blood sugar down or to bring it back up. It's just the way it has to happen because blood sugar is a driving force behind all of biochemistry. And the closer a person can get to euglycemia because they're putting equal calories from protein, carbohydrate, and fat together every time they're eating, then they're getting closer to the interstate highway traffic. And now they've got a blood sugar that looks like this instead of a
Yes.
blood sugar that looks like this. Oh, and then we can go in all the iterations of all that. So when your blood sugar goes like this, how are you feeling? How are you feeling during the day? You're up and
Yes.
down on a roller coaster all day long.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that moves into the realm of psychiatry. People who have manic depressive disorder are on,
Up
a blood sugar roller coaster. And there really
absolutely.
isn't much discussion about this. It's about medications and not getting to the root cause of the problem. And I'm talking about this because I feel like it's extremely important. The other thing that, is part of this is that when calories are burned, it's not just the inflammation in the, in the word, but literally it's a fire. It's a fire inside of the body. And when people are eating a ketogenic diet because it lowers insulin levels to the point where a person isn't storing fat, well, what's happening to all these fat calories that a person's consuming? It's a grease fire. It's a grease
Mm.
fire inside the body, and that grease fire is elevating tumor necrosis factor alpha, often with normal blood sugar. And a lot of people are wearing continuous glucose monitors now. So
Yeah.
people who are on keto, and it's many, many athletes now,
Mm.
to control their weight, but what's happening, what are the consequences of what they're doing inside? Those extra calories, those extra fat calories, which are devoid of water, burn a really, really, really hot fire. So a person who's burning these ketones and these acetones and the beta hydroxybutyrates, they have a grease fire inside of them and they have ketone breath. So all these
Yeah.
waste products are coming out of their mouth. This is not a body that's in balance. This is a body
Yes.
that's diseased.
Mhm.
So in our I don't know, desire, if that's a good word, to maintain weight, we've lost the science. And I'll repeat it again. Nutrition is a science. It's not a diet plan. Because even if we're
Mhm.
in the mindset of dieting, we're in the world of excess. If we're
Yeah.
constantly thinking about we're having to diet, we're already tipped over into excess. And what ultimately does excess lead to? Complete breakdown. That's when disease is out of control. There's complete breakdown because the cells cannot renew, and then you have cancer, and then you have Alzheimer's disease, and then you have ALS or MS, or you have diabetes and loss of eyesight and hypertension and all these things. When you tip the balance to a disease of breakdown, it's very hard to come back from that. Very
Yeah.
hard. Because the human body continues and has to burn calories to live. We are not making our own food. We have the lowest life expectancy on planet Earth because we're dependent on something else for food. Plants and fungi are the oldest living bacteria, are the oldest living organic things on Earth. They make their own food. It's because humans have to process food and have to burn it that we have the lowest lifespan. And another confounding, I think, thing that isn't quite understood is that it takes energy to burn energy. So your body has to use energy to extract from food. The food has to be broken down, which takes
Mm.
energy, to then move into the system as the piece parts, the amino acids, the fatty acids, the simple sugars that require energy to rebuild things. So, actually, in a human body that isn't making its own food, at best, it's a zero sum game. It
Got it.
actually takes more energy to make an ATP molecule than the energy that's released when the phosphorus bond is broken and that ATP, the phosphate, is released.
Interesting.
Making ATP and then releasing the energy in the ATP is an energy losing phenomenon.
It's not very optimized. I've heard you talk about fulvic acids. What are
Yeah,
they and why are they
yeah.
important?
So if the fulvic acid group, it's more aptly termed a fulvic group or fulvic substances. So these are, for lack of a better way to explain it, these are substances made by the microbiome and given to us by Mother Nature 2.4 billion years ago. It was fungi on planet Earth that turned the mineral rock of planet Earth and was able to make carbon, and that form of carbon is called fulvic substances. Carbon is integral to the life cycle of all organic matter, plants, animals that eat plants, etc. So it's a very complex organic structure that has a multitude of actions. Fulvic acids, fulvic substances contain polyphenols, they contain tannins, they contain flavonoids and flavones, they contain ubiquinones. They contain the precursors for vitamin D and E and K. They contain the methyl groups for producing amino acids. The methyl groups also are a source of acetyl-CoA that's going to go on into the mitochondria and be utilized to produce ATP. They are fundamentally things that support and sustain all of oxidation reduction reactions, which is every single biochemical reaction in the body, not just in the mitochondria, but everywhere, is an oxidation reduction reaction. Something is losing electrons, which is called oxidation. Something is gaining electrons. And it's the movement of electrons and protons that keeps the system running. So fundamentally, it's fulvic substances that keep the system running. Without fulvic substances, the human body, the plant body cannot work. And in modern agriculture, commercial agriculture, and even some organic methods, fulvic substances are being depleted from the soil. It's not minerals that are depleted from the soil, it's fulvic substances. Fulvic substances as electron donors and proton donors, electron receivers, and proton receivers are literally the electricity, the life in the soil. Fulvic substances electrify dead soil, they electrify dead water, and they allow for the movement of nutrients from the soil into the plant and then into the human being. And when I going back to what I was saying, that dis-ease starts with a loss of power. What is fundamentally that power? It's electricity. So
Mm,
fulvic substances are intimately connected to the electrical systems in our body. And they need to be supplemented in modern times because they're deficient in the soil. In fact,
mhm.
it's really a critical mass right now. The soil scientists have some idea that we probably have 6 to 8 planting seasons left. It's so dire that the soil is dying. The soil
Mm,
around the world is dying. And that's another part of my message, and my colleague, Dr. Faust, who's been in regenerative agriculture for almost 60 years now. And many other people, but our life, physical life, our human life comes from the soil. We are organic matter and we are dependent on the soil. And when the soil dies, we die. So
mhm.
it's dire. It's a dire situation. And we have to have fulvic acids. What are polyphenols? They're fulvic substances. What are tannins? What are flavonoids? They're fulvic substances. How do these
Okay.
things get in tartary buckwheat or blueberries or coffee? Because the plants have taken them out of the soil in the form of fulvic substances and incorporated it into their structure. So when we get fulvic acids, we are getting the pure things that we need without having to burn any calories. Fulvic substances are anti-inflammatory. That's a huge thing. Why are
Yeah.
they anti-inflammatory? Because there's no heat processing required to bring them into our system. And when we have adequate amounts of fulvic substances in our body, we also need less food. Why? Because when we have fully electrified our cells and every single structure in it, I call it the pieces of machinery on the factory floor, the ribosomes, which make different proteins, the Golgi complex, which are part of the entire system, the lysosomes, which are the recycling systems in the cells, the mRNA, the DNA, all these structures, the machines on the factory floor are recyclable. When the cell is fully electrified, then the structure is recycled.
Uh,
We need less food. And what is required for that recycling process? Water. Without water, there is no electricity. You have to have water to conduct electricity.
yes.
And then the fulvic substances are supporting that conductions. So that's why I call my practice foundational medicine, because the foundation of all this, of human life, is built on water and fulvic substances. Yes, and then we can get down to the mitochondria and the production of ATP, but not every cell action requires or involves ATP. ATP fuels what's called phosphorylation reactions in the body, which are important, but not there are more reactions in the body than ATP product requiring energy. ATP doesn't even fuel its own production. It's water and electricity that is driving the electron transport chain. It's not ATP that's creating the power to drive its production. ATP is more aptly called an energy coupling agent. ATP is not electricity. It is an
Mm.
energy carrier molecule, but it isn't electricity.
Should we care about the quality of the water if water is that foundation?
Yeah.
Because there are many different levels of water quality. Some people say tap water is fine in a big city, but I suspect that good quality water is very important.
Yes, good quality water is definitely part of the equation. And as we all know, we don't live in the high Himalayas. If we had been living in prehistoric times, we would be living near a stream. We go out in the backyard, and we would get this fulvic substances rich water, which is a golden color. Or we'd be constantly in the season where and in the climates and the altitudes where there's constant waterfalls creating electricity in the air. So, but we don't live like that. So we know that there are things required. We have to, in some way, decontaminate the water, parasites and fungus and bacteria. So that's
Yeah.
where the chlorination process comes in, or that's where the RO process comes in, or the multi-stage filtration comes in, or the distillation process, etc. There's various different ways to remove microbes, to remove chemical chemical metabolites, toxic chemical metabolites of all kinds, petroleum products, drug residues,
Mm.
perfluorinated alkylating substances, etc. The problem is in the processing of water, which is required in modern times, the water has been stripped of its life too. The
Hmm.
water that we're drinking is dead water. This water that's inside of us must be moving with a propulsive force. It's called a vortex implosive force. And when the water is dead, it doesn't carry that force anymore. We know that, for instance, just taking water and putting it through a multi-stage filtration system um, reduces the speed of the water from like 637 um, um, liters per minute to something like 580. I mean, that's a significant drop in flow pressure. And that then affects the flow dynamics inside our body. Our body is supposed to move in the blood and the lymph and the liquid fluids of our body with a vortex flow. That's life sustaining and self cleaning and all that. So in order to get water with the most beneficial properties, the water that's been processed must be put through some sort of finishing process to restore the vortex energy. And that's as simple as adding a piece of plumbing pipe to your whole house so that when water comes through after you've done the RO or the filtration, so the water's now coming through the vortexing system, or after you've RO'd the water at your sink, you put it through a vortexing pipe to restore the life to your water. And my initial experiments with all this is that I was actually taught about this by a Chinese medicine colleague of mine, and he introduced me to this process and gave me a plumbing piece by which I could create the vortex water. And I had a plant in my office that, I mean, it seemed like it needed water all the time, and it was, like, at the end of every day, it would just be drooping. And I started watering with vortex water, and I noticed that the stems were upright, and if I pulled one back, it would immediately spring back. It had resilience. And you talk about this in your flame method. Resilience, infinite flexibility in the face of constant change, and resilience is what supports optimal health. So when we restore the flow of water and the force of water and the power of water, then we're optimizing the water element of our body, which then gets again back to energy equals water, and water at the vortex state. Because if we look at the recurring patterns in nature, nature is a vortex. A tornado is a vortex. A cyclone is a vortex. Electrons circling, sorry, uh, the center of the atom. It's a vortex. We live in whirling vortexes all around us. And
Hmm.
when we lose that vortex energy, we lose power and we lose life. The other thing that's really important in this is that if we don't have adequate amounts of power, there's something called a toric tube that every living system running electricity has. It's a force field around us. It's an electromagnetic force field that's created by the induction motor that's running us. So every flowing circuit of electricity creates electromagnetism and an electromagnetic field. And that electromagnetic field is our force field shield against G, as an example, against the stronger forces of the moon. The moon has a stronger magnetic force even than the human body. We're affected by the moon cycle. We're affected by the sun cycles.
Hmm.
We're affected by energies that are stronger than a human
Yeah.
body, which is running elements that are less than 20 on the elemental chart. So when we are doing these things, when we're drinking vortex water and supplementing with fulvic substances,
Hmm.
we're creating a strong electromagnetic field around us. We are not powerless. If you got on the internet and started reading, every day I get into my inbox, I'm bombarded with this, we're bombarded by that.
Hmm.
We're just hapless in this tidal waves of toxicity. We're not powerless. We have within us the strongest pharmacy known to man, the strongest regenerative force known to man. But we have to nurture it and we have to cultivate it. And that's where the biochemical eating comes into place. Because if there's too much fire being burned just to process food, then that electromagnetic field weakens. And yes, you're susceptible to 5G and all the other stronger electromagnetic influences than the human body. So it's really
So
profound,
it
the
really
kinds of
is.
things that can happen from simply nurturing and supporting the foundation.
Mm. And superfoods and supplements, and my YouTube feed is full of, it's all about creatine. Oh no, actually, it's all about, glycine or whatever it might be. What are your thoughts on all of these?
No, supplements are just that. They're supplements. They don't sustain and support the integrity of the system.
Mm.
You can have all the washers and the nuts and the tires and the radios and whatever sitting in your factory floor, but if you don't have the machinery that's using these things to put them together, it's overloading the system. Creatine is an example. It's one of the most volatile amino acids. It's a combination of glycine, arginine, and I think methionine. I might not have that totally right. But creatine is broken down immediately in the stomach by hydrochloric acid and pepsin into those three amino acids. It's no longer creatine.
Oh.
Creatine in the muscle and creatine phosphokinase, CPK, is supported by the enzyme systems in the muscles that are generating they're called plasmagens. I don't think I have that right either. But anyway, CPK, creatine phosphokinase, is made in the muscles by enzymes, and enzymes that are relegated by biochemistry to be dependent on several things, primarily what's called substrate concentration. Enzymes are like machines. They can only handle so much at any given time. So if you're overloading your system with protein, carbohydrate, fat, and what you're eating, you can't make CPK in adequate amounts.
Mhm.
Enzymes are very dependent on pH. So if you have a relatively more acidic environment because you're eating fruit that delivers fruit or lemon water or lime water, or you're out of balance with foods that are low pH, high in acid, then you're delivering things into your intestinal tract that makes your intestines acidic. Intestinal enzymes don't work at an acid pH. And the muscle enzymes don't work very well either at acid pH. They have to be at the pH of the blood, because the blood is what's carrying the nutrients, the glycine, the methionine, the arginine, to your muscles, that's going to continuously recycle and regenerate CPK while you're exercising. Can't take getting on the supplements. Vitamin C is an important cofactor in an enzyme. If your enzymes are broken, vitamin C won't help you. If your own cells aren't making hormones, you can't you can't micromanage a system with hormones, because the hormones depend on enzymes, which are driven by electricity. If you don't have electrical power, enzymes are rotors. They're literally mechanical motors and rotors in your body. They're being driven by electricity. And if you don't have enzyme systems, because you've broken the substrate rule, too much, excess, and you've broken the pH rule, and you've broken the salt rule. Enzymes are very sensitive to salt, which means higher alkaline pH, and they're very sensitive to temperature. Enzymes don't work at a temperature of 104 degrees Fahrenheit. They don't work at a temperature of 92 degrees Fahrenheit. So when you're breaking the rules of the conditions that are necessary for the enzymes to work, it's impossible for the system to work, and you cannot micromanage that. But when you get water that has power, when you get fulvic substances that sustain and support the movement of electricity and get water into the cells, then you've got all the ingredients to maintain your enzyme systems. And that's when your body then, with its own intelligence, is doing the micromanaging. Supplements do not cure diseases. They just don't. And yes, creatine can have some benefits in a person who does have functioning enzymes
Yeah.
that can take those amino acids when they get to the muscle and put them
Yeah.
together. But
Mhm.
when you're taking creatine, it's not creatine powder that gets to your muscle. It's the 3 amino acids that get to your muscle.
Yeah. And taking it in a completely dysregulated system, it makes no sense anyway. You may as well start with the foundations, as you said, and
Correct.
then you can look at, well, optimization comes later.
Correct. See, and the other part of this, which isn't well known, but I did touch
Mm.
on earlier, is that the truth is that most people are drowning in their own waste. I
Wow.
talked about the lysosomes earlier,
Mm.
these pieces of machinery inside the cell, the recycling system. They're responsible for getting rid of waste. What is required for a lysosome to function? Electricity and proper pH. And if your lysosomes can't function, you can't get rid of your own metabolic waste, which is acidic. So it's not really coming from the food we're eating that's causing the acid environment in our stomach per se. It's breaking the rules of biochemistry that sets up the conditions for our body not to be able to clear its own waste. And when we can't clear waste, it means we have a stagnant pond inside of us. And that stagnant pond, we all know what grows in a stagnant pond.
Yes.
Bacteria, viruses,
Yeah.
CMV, EBV, Lyme disease, Candida, fungal
Yeah.
diseases.
Yeah.
These are all coming from the fact that our enzyme systems aren't working, water isn't flowing, we don't have enough electricity, and we now become a stagnant pond. That's what
Hmm.
it is. And no amount of antifungals, antiparasitics, antibacterials, no amount of supplementation will regenerate this system and repair the system. It has to be repaired from the ground up by
Yeah.
restoring the electricity. Because if you don't remove the food supply for the fungi or the bacteria or the viruses, you can't kill them. You take away their food supply by restoring flow, by restoring electricity, by restoring pH, then the whole system works to take nutrients in just the right amount, proteins, carbohydrates, and fats in balance at the right time, not too much, not too little. And now we have a system that's complete. I call it the going, the being, the doing, the processing, the dynamic action, thinking, breathing, walking, talking, and the reverse, the recycling or the repair, the cooling side, the
Yes.
resting side, the cleaning up side of our body. They have to be in balance. If we spend more time every day in flames with whatever we're doing, we don't have enough time to rest and recycle and repair and radiate that heat. So water serves as a radiator system in the body. But if we have an imbalance between the heat flame producing part of our body and the cooling system, we're always going to err on the side of the heat. Why? Because if we don't have heat, we don't live. It's trying to find the balance. We are inside of us, conglomeration of equals and opposites. It's just we have to be that way. We couldn't live otherwise. So it's finding that balance between equal and opposites. And we do that in many ways, certainly. But
Hmm.
I'm talking about from the biochemical perspective, the energetic perspective, the power perspective. It's about balance and maintaining the system in such a way that there's just a small enough flame. The pilot light keeps burning, but not so much that it's destroying the system, that it's incinerating the system.
Yes. I love that. Dr. Wanek, this has been amazing, and you've taken us on a journey to the absolute foundations, energy, power, the elements, all the way through to fulvic acid, through to just
Correct.
that balance in what we eat between proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, and water. Is there anything else you'd like to leave people with today, and where can they find you to connect with you?
Well, just to go further a little bit,
Mm,
people have been programmed to believe that insulin's a demon.
mm,
It's not. We have to have insulin to get sugar, glucose into our cells.
yes.
We have to have insulin to make new muscle. We have to have insulin to regenerate bone. Insulin is an essential hormone. So is glucagon, so is cortisol, so is epinephrine. It's all about balance.
Hmm.
And we have to find that balance by becoming more knowledgeable about these things. It's not a soundbite. It does living life fully in a human body is an active sport. It requires engagement. It requires work. Yes, and to have this, you have to do the work. So my life has been dedicated to that in one way or the other. I do the work myself. I inspire people to do the work and support them as a coach, more or less, in that work. And then ultimately to the website, Live a Mana Life. What is mana? MANA. It's the life force energy. It's an
Hmm.
invitation to live a mana life, to engage with these principles that I'm talking about. Know how many calories you need every day. Know how much protein, how much fat, how much carbohydrate you need every day. Burn a low flame. That's what protects you. That's what allows you to keep going. That's what allows you to be the strongest system possible. It's when we tip the balance into an excess. Too much, too much food, too much protein, too much carbohydrate, too much fat, or by the same token, having to break that down by fire inside of us because we've broken those rules. We can't possibly live an optimal life. And so, that's what I would encourage people to do. Just become more um, active in this basic knowledge. And I have a website, wanekmedical.com, Wanek medical, medical. I've written several articles in the blog section that expounds on what I've just said in greater detail and talks about the fundamental principles, earth, air, fire, water, and metal, and more about the system inside of us. You are not a double-blinded, randomized, placebo-controlled trial. You are an individual having a unique, valid life experience, and I'm using you in the pejorative, everybody is a unique individual, but yet with certain fundamental principles that run us. And so by just becoming more pro in this kind of knowledge, understanding this more, it's empowering. Take your power back. Don't don't believe everything you hear or say. It's hard in this explosion of information on the internet, even with Chat GPT and Grok and all this AI. It's still only the information that's been collated from what anybody has put out there. Is it true
Yeah,
or false? You have to
that's
also
exactly.
learn your own experience, trust your own experience with this, and
Hmm.
have your body participate more in basic biochemistry, the science of biochemistry, and then live a mono life. That's the website, all spelled out, LIVEAMANALIFE, which is more about the fundamental principles of water and fulvic substances. And I'll digress a little bit on the fulvic substances. There are so many fulvic mineral, humic fulvic mineral, fulvic acid products on the market, but none of them are fulvic substances. They are not produced in such a way that they are fulvic substances made by nature. And that's what I've been using with my patients for 25 years now. I've seen the difference. I know what it does because I measure blood testing, I measure urine testing, I measure body composition. I get a gestalt about how a person is living and breathing and walking and talking. So I've had the experience, and I ask people, trust your body. Don't believe something else that contradicts your experience. You have
Hmm.
to distrust, you have to trust the teacher within. That's your own experience. And I find that there are too many people that are trusting someone else and negating their own experience. That's such an important part of this. Know yourself. Know
Yeah.
yourself and nurture your own power. Take your power back. Knowledge is power.
Thank you so much.